Sandy says read, and welcome to the channel. Merry Christmas, everybody, and welcome to a re-recording of a review and discussion of Five and Dime Christmas. Let me get this up there where you can see the cover without too much glare. I've already recorded this video for you maybe 2 weeks ago. Can I find it now? No, I cannot. So we're going to redo it. Yes, we're redoing this video. Luckily, I had saved all my notes. Thank goodness. I typically, after I do a review here on the channel, I'll tuck the notes into just like the back of the book, just put it back on the shelf. Sometimes I'll use the notes to type up a review on like Goodreads or Amazon. I especially like to do that if it's an indie book or an independent publishing house book. I like to make sure I get a review posted somewhere just to get more numbers for the author and for the publishing house, right? That's important stuff out there, you guys. So I keep those notes. Thank goodness I keep those notes because I can't find the review I filmed for you guys. So we're going to do it again. And I've got my notes here to do it from. Fabulous, right? It's like I planned ahead or something. Before we begin, a little housekeeping item. I want to invite you all to subscribe to the channel. Please welcome your friends to subscribe to the channel too, because this is a book channel. We do all kinds of bookish stuff here. We do book reviews multiple times. We do booktube tags and all kinds of bookish fun stuff. Okay, what else? Oh, I want to invite you guys to go ahead and download your own Sandy Says Read Bingo Baker card. I'll put a link to this in the drop-down box below, just in case I remember to say some of the phrases that are on the bingo card. You can check them off as I say them and get that dopamine hit for finding a phrase that I say. There are no prizes for this. No, this channel doesn't give away prizes. Can't afford that at this time. Maybe in the future. Not yet. Is that all the housekeeping stuff we need to do? I've said Merry Christmas, right? Merry Christmas. Yay. Let's do some more Christmas content. And as part of our Christmas content, we have the Five and Dime Christmas 4 Historical Novellas book. This was published, oh, it's in the specs, right? I've got the specs here for you. All right. This was published in 2022, so just 2 years ago, by Barber Publishing. Now, you guys, I am going to read the back cover for you. We'll do that. I will read the back cover, each of the back cover synopses as we talk about each of the stories in the book. All right, we're going to do it that way. Slightly organized, you might say. I do want to be cautious not to give away every single spoiler in each of the stories because it was only published 2 years ago, and you might be interested in running out and grabbing a copy of this for yourself, or ordering it from Barber Publishing yourself. And I can recommend that. You guys, I am going to recommend this because it is a sweet, lovely, just warm, Christmassy set of stories. Okay, it is nice. It is sweet. It is clean romance. It is just really, it's very Hallmark Channel-y, if you understand what I'm saying. Okay, it's very Hallmark Christmas movie centric, but set in Victorian times. Okay, let me give you a bit of the back cover, like a synopsis of the overall Christmas theme that's going on here. All right, Christmas is a time for romance at a 1880s department store. Visit Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1881, where the Woolworths Five and Dime has become the center of Christmas commerce and a great place to fall in love. And now this is all coming back to me. I remember being on camera and trying to say Woolworths to you guys here on camera. Yeah. So if I just stumble through that word every single time I try to say it, please ignore it. Pretend I'm saying it correctly. Woolworths Five and Dime. Okay. But that's the main setting in Scranton, Pennsylvania for all 4 of our stories, because the 4 female leads in these stories work at Woolworth Five and Dime. We're going to call it the store. They work at the store, okay? And each one of them has this little romance that happens in their life. They're at the store. Shall we begin? All right. Did I give you a Sandy synopsis? All right, the Sandy synopsis. Each of the 4 stories takes place around or with a clerk from the store. Each is a happily ever after. Okay, it's a sweet romance at Christmas time kind of thing. Happily ever after. So that's the most spoiler you're going to get from me. Okay. And let's see, 3 of the stories. Oh yeah, 3 of the stories begin with a verse out of the King James Bible. The final story doesn't begin with a verse, it begins with a little prologue actually. And the final story introduces us to or follows the story of a character that we've been like hinting at in the other 3 stories. It's like the culmination of this gal, Maggie, this gal that we've been introduced to. We've kind of seen her. She's been hinted at. She's this nice person who works at the lunch counter at the store, and we've interacted with her briefly in the other 3 stories, and then in the final story it's her, and we get to meet her and really explore her story and her backstory and what happened to her. And we get to root for her specifically in the final story, which is very nice. Another thing that each of the stories has in common is this theme of influenza. There is a flu going around in 1881, and the flu actually factors in pretty heavily in one of the stories. So that's a crisis that's going on kind of in the background. Okay. So let us go to the first story in the book, A Merry Little Christmas by Susanne Dietze, or Dietze. She spells her name Dietze. So there you go. Her story goes from pages 5 to 110, and the back cover synopsis for her story is A Merry Little Christmas. Woolworth's store clerk Hattie Scott's heart is touched by a handsome customer, but when she takes on additional secretarial work to earn money for Christmas, she learns her new boss is Englishman Timothy Branson, her favorite customer, and a threat to her brother's job. Can 2 proud hearts overcome their differences to help her brother and find love? Now, this story, this first one in here, it's actually introducing us to more than just the store and Hattie and Timothy. We're getting introduced to Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1881 through this story. We're getting to meet Timothy, who is an Englishman who has come over to work in Pennsylvania for a while. He's helping the folks who run the mine figure out how to increase production at the mine. And his ideas, his theory is probably going to put a lot of people out of work, including Hattie's brother. So when Timothy needs someone to help him with some secretarial work, and Hattie steps into that role, and she figures out, hey, wait, this is going to put my brother out of work. This could put a lot of people out of work. You're no longer my favorite customer. Well, they have to overcome that, and they have to come up with some other ways that maybe they can use this efficient work idea to keep people employed and not get them out of work, right? So there's a lot more going on than just this little budding romance in the first story. And we're getting introduced to the whole community there in Scranton and the Woolworth store and just a whole lot of stuff. We're getting introduced to a lot of stuff in that first story. I think it was very smart that Barber Publishing put that story first in this set of stories. I mean, it's set up so much. It gave us such a good foundation for the other things that were coming up. That was brilliant. Okay. What other notes did I give you for that? Oh yeah, this story, it was well paced. The pacing of it was excellent. I enjoyed this one very much, and it did not ever feel rushed. There were a couple other stories that when we got to, that third act climax moment, they just felt a little bit rushed into, in a romance story, you're going to have the couple have their little disagreement and you think, oh no, they're going to break up and they got to stay together like a romance does, right? And that crisis point felt a little rushed in a couple of the stories. And I'm going to give you an example of that in story number 2 in just a minute. But when I do, please don't hear that as a complaint. Even though a couple of the stories, that moment felt a little rushed, the pacing didn't feel as smooth as it did in this first story, in a couple of the others. it still worked. Okay, it still fit the Victorian feel that the rest of the story was going for. If that makes sense. Are you tracking with me here? I hope that makes sense. It's still, I'll give you the example when we get to story number 2. And now we are in the notes ready for story number 2, A Home for Christmas by Patti Smith Hall. And this one goes from pages 115 to 216. And let me read the back cover synopsis of that one for you. A Home for Christmas. Essie Banfield doesn't need money, but welcomes the challenges of working a job where she meets a minister and 6 little boys who inspire Christmas wishes. But will Pastor Max Warner trust that she is more than just a socialite with charitable intentions? Because what we have in our second story is Essie. She is upper crust, okay, in this town. And in this town, we do get to see the different levels of, I don't want to call it a caste system, but we do get to see some upper level society and middle class and some very poor people too. And Essie is more upper crust. Okay. She's from a very well-to-do family. She doesn't need the job at Woolworths, but she takes the job at Woolworths because she wants to prove to herself that she can hold down a job. She can take care of herself. She can earn a living if she needed to. She wants to do this. And while she's there, one of the customers she meets is this pastor, Pastor Max. He's not well-to-do. He does have a job as pastor, and he has taken in these children, these orphans off the street, and he's got a house that he is renting at a very low rate, and he's just able to provide for them and give them a home, give them education, help them through just the trials that street children would be going through in that time. Okay, he's able to give them a home and provide for them, help them, get them clothing, food, shelter. And when Essie figures out this is what's going on, she wants to help. She wants to give. She wants to be a part of something bigger than just herself. And that's a really nice message happening in that story. Now, here's where this particular story, this second story has that rushed ending that I was talking about. Hold, please. Let me see if I can get there. Page 213. The story itself is only about 100 pages long, right? But on page, and I write down here on the 97th page, I can't even get to it, you guys. Okay. On the 97th page, we have Essie's father deciding, look, this pastor is after her money, probably. So he sends an envelope with a check in it to Max. And Max is totally offended by this. He's like, oh, no. I don't want the money. I want Essie. I want to marry her. So he then goes to Essie's father's home. And so I think that's on page 213, the 98th page. Okay, he approaches the home, and Essie and her father are having a conversation where Essie's like, you know what? I think I love him a lot. Surprise. And then let's see, page 214. We got Max. Max shows up at the house. Page 215, Max announces he wants to marry her. And page 216, they decide, yeah, let's do that. And she says here, yes, she nodded, her heart threatening to beat out of her chest. He rose, and they shared another bone-melting kiss before finally breaking apart. When they'd caught their breath, Max kissed her nose, then stepped back. You know what I want to do? She smiled at him. Probably the same thing I do. They stared into each other's eyes. Go tell the boys. And so that's the wrap. They decide, yeah, we should get married. I just spoiled the story for you. I'm sorry. There's a lot that leads up to this, okay? But that crisis moment and the resolution of it happened in basically 3 pages. We go from page 213, where her father is basically paying this guy off, to page 216, where they're smiling into each other's eyes and saying, we should tell the boys that we're going to get married. It had happened so quickly. But there is this, throughout those 4 pages, there is still that sense of Victorian propriety. Okay, they're still very pure and staid. Okay, it's still lovely and nice and Christmassy. Okay, if that makes sense. Let's go on to story number 3, and that is The Light of Christmas by Christina Lorenzen. And this one goes from pages 221 to 320, and I'll read the back cover synopsis for you. A job is the only thing independent orphan Lizzie Miller needs, and Henry Kimball is singularly focused on proving his success outside the family business. But could the lure of an old-fashioned family Christmas bring them together? So this one, we've kind of switched the socialite concept around, and Henry Kimball is the fellow who doesn't necessarily need a job at the store. But he's decided he's going to go it on his own. Instead of working for his father's family business, he's going to go to Woolworths, and he's going to he's going to work as a clerk first, and he's going to work his way up the ladder into an accountant position. That's his goal. But while he's there, he notices Lizzie Miller. She's an orphan. She lives alone in this house that was left to her. And he thinks she's just grand, and she thinks he's just grand, and they have to figure out that they like each other. And yeah. Is that enough of that? Okay. So the final story in our 4 novellas, the final one is the one where we get to meet Maggie. As I mentioned earlier, each one of these stories taking place in the store does include like a scene at the lunch counter or an interaction with the gal who runs the lunch counter, Maggie. And in one of the stories, and I don't remember which one it was now, but in one of the stories, one of the girls makes a mention of, it wasn't fair what happened to Maggie. Okay, so something happened, that seed is planted. So when we get to Maggie's story, we're like, ooh, what's gone on? What's happened? So let me read you the back cover. Oh, and her story, it's by Cynthia Hickey, and it goes from pages 325 to 429. And our back cover says, Maggie Larson works the lunch counter where she befriends a girl whose lonely father delivers milk each Friday. Friday's noon hour becomes the highlight of Maggie's week. But after being left at the altar, she closed her heart to love and to God. Will Seth Jameson be able to unlock her heart? Okay, spoiler, yes, he will. Yes, yeah. That's the romance. That's the happily ever after of this Christmas stuff, okay? So basically, Maggie was set to be married. And in the prologue, we see she's there. She's in her gown. She's waiting for her fiance to show up so they can go down the aisle and get married. And instead, a letter is delivered to her. And she's like, oh, whoops. And the letter is basically, hey, sorry, Maggie, but I'm going to go off to like New York or wherever, right? Wherever he went off to seek his fortune there. Decided not to get married. So sorry. So Maggie she's bereft. She's sad. This is awful. And she's decided, okay, men suck. And why would God let this happen to me? So she's disappointed in God too. So she stops going to church. She doesn't want anything to do with anything. She just wants to do her job, help other people, and stay out of romantic entanglements. That's what she's decided to do. And then along comes Seth Jameson and his little girl, and they have lost their mom. Seth has lost his wife to illness. But when she was on her deathbed, she told him, hey, look, find happiness again. Find a woman who will love you again. So, giving him permission to find a new mom for his daughter. Okay. Well, the daughter comes into the lunch counter and is like, Maggie, hi. And you sure are pretty. And Dad, isn't she pretty? And hey, Dad, she'd make a great mom, which is embarrassing to everyone. But those little embarrassing moments just keep stacking up. Now, Maggie's mother owns a bed and breakfast there in town. So when Seth's kitchen catches fire and practically burns down his house, not entirely, but burns down a section of his house, he has to stay somewhere. So guess where he stays? Of course, at Maggie's mother's bed and breakfast. So he and the little girl and Maggie are like under the same roof for a period of time before Christmas. So they're like forced to be near one another, in close proximity to one another. And he's very handy with things, like he can paint and make wooden things. He's not a carpenter, but he can make things. He's a farmer, but he can also make things. So he is making the scenery for the Christmas pageant, the Christmas play at church. And he asks Maggie, will you help me? Well, she doesn't want to do stuff at church, but she's willing to help. So she goes and she helps, and they're painting and they're doing these things, and she's getting closer to God and getting closer to the person she used to be. And Seth sees that as a good thing because he is falling in love with her, but he doesn't want to fall in love with a woman who doesn't have God in her heart, doesn't doesn't have that relationship with God anymore. He's worried about that, and he prays about it. He wants to fall in love with her. He feels that happening, but he wants a good, godly woman in his life to help raise his daughter. Spoiler alert, it all works out. But you have to read the story to see how it all like flows together so nicely. Yeah, it all just flows together. Anyway, this story is the one that lets you see Maggie's arc, Maggie coming into her own again. Yeah, it's very nice, very pretty. Okay, now you guys, those are the 4 stories that, like I said, they're that picture of Victorian Christmas loveliness, right? But set in the Northeast of the United States. Nicely done, very pretty. But now we have to put this on the Christmas cheer chart. So hold on, let me grab the Christmas cheer chart. We're gonna have the suddenly appearing whiteboard in just a second here. So here is our suddenly appearing Christmas cheer chart for 2024. And we have already put, because I already filmed this once before, we've already put the 5 and dime stories, all 4 of them grouped together up here in this quadrant. We have the axis for the reason for the season, and these 4 stories, they all completely remember the reason for the season. I mean, we have God, we have Christ, we have the baby Jesus in all these stories. Okay, so the reason for the season is there. We're way up here. But they weren't all like festive. We didn't, this is the axis for our degree of festiveness that we have going on in our stories. They were not dry as a fruitcake. None of them were dry as a fruitcake, but they were not that light display that you can see from space. Okay, they weren't focused on everyone having a big, huge Christmas tree full of all kinds of stuff, right? They weren't all candles and hay rides and stuff like that, right? There was a nice mix of festiveness, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I put it up here kind of in the middle, but up top in this quadrant, the 5 and dimes, the 4 stories of the 5 and dimes are up here in our Christmas cheer chart for 2024, right? You guys, that's, I think, the wrap up of the 5 and dime. Let me get it up here so you can see the book again with this very nice fancy cover. There we go. That is the wrap up for the 5 and dime Christmas. There you go. And thumbs up for Christmas 5 and dime Victorian stuff. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in again.